It's now time, this part of our program, to hear from some of our allies. And it's my great pleasure to welcome to our gathering Bob Rhudy, an attorney, mediator, consultant, and trainer, also a member of the executive committee of the Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform. Oh, by the way, I'm Ken Phelps, rector of All Saints in Sunderland. MAJR has been an ally and friend of the Public Policy Network for several years now. Although, Bob, I got to tell you, coming from Southern Maryland, I need to add, any friend of Vicky and Dusty Rhodes is a friend of ours at All Saints. MAJR caught my personal attention and drew me a little deeper into engagement through the Public Policy Network around the issue of solitary confinement or restrictive housing. But I want Bob to tell you about that particular initiative and other critical pieces of MAJR's legislative agenda for 2021. So, Bob, it's great to have you here with us, and again, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again. Great to be with you. Also, Crystal Francis, another member of the executive committee, is going to be joining us. If we can bring her in, we'll share this presentation. Another member of our executive committee, Pat Marks, I just noticed is on with us as well. And if she wants to join in on anything, add some additional remarks, I'd be delighted if that can be done also. So thank you, Reverend. It's great to be with you virtually this morning. Not quite as much fun as being face to face as we have been several times the past few years, but I'm glad we've got technology that allows us to do this in these difficult times. I guess we've been in existence 6 years now. We've got close to 2,000 people who are signed up with us across the state, working with a lot of faith groups and other organizations around incarceration reform, criminal justice reform, solitary confinement, you mentioned, and a whole bunch of other areas. We've had some good successes. We've had a lot of areas that we're still working on. I find this year, I think, probably more legislation in the areas that we've been working on than ever before. So it's the legislature is, our General Assembly is very much involved in these issues. We're looking forward to, I think, a number of successes this year. And I'm sure there'll be areas that we will continue to be working on that next year and down the road. Let me hit some of our we've got we call it the Executive Committee rather than the Board of Directors, about 12 members, pretty interesting composition that includes returned citizens, lawyers, people with Crystal Francis is I think a PhD in criminal justice areas, and the former public defender from Washington, D.C., Linda, who couldn't be with us this morning. She's engaged in at Howard University Law School. So it's I think a pretty good working group. I'm going to encourage, we'll be talking more in our breakout session this afternoon with more specifics about whoever can join us, but I'll try to give an overview for, I know there's a number of breakout groups and interest groups, so not everybody will be with us, of course. I'd encourage you to look at our website, which includes a lot of background on the areas we've been working in, a little bit of the history of the organization. We've got a couple of honorary co-chairs, which includes former Chief Judge Bob Bell, recently became a honorary co-chair with us, and sorry he couldn't be with us this morning, and our former governor, Republican Governor Bob. Our website is for Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform is www.ma and the number 4jr.org. It lists all of our legislative initiatives, and sort of, you can see initiatives at the top of the homepage, 2021, and all of the bills that we are working on are listed. And if you click on the bill, in addition to the numbers and the committees they're in front of, et cetera, it'll give you a background on the bills. And The bills will be frequently broken down between three different categories: front door, behind the walls, and back door, which are three committees. Front door is trying to keep people from going into prison in the first place, a number of initiatives. Behind the walls are things that we'd like to see change within the prison, and to help people through the rehabilitation while they're in school education and other activities, and also elimination of or substantial elimination to the greatest extent possible of practices like solitary confinement. And behind the walls, Crystal Francis is the clerk chair of that committee, is what happens to help people when they get out and once again not return. Something that I didn't know before I started working in this area. I'm an attorney, but my background has been primarily civil law. I was the executive director of Maryland Legal Services Corporation, which was the overview body for civil legal aid in the state for, I guess, about 17 years, and more recently do primarily mediation in various areas. I have done some work, particularly in Iowa Des Moines before I came to Maryland about 30 years ago. Maryland, I think, does a number of things pretty well. I'm proud of the state in a lot of areas. In terms of incarceration, we've got a lot to catch up on. We have the highest rate of African Americans, Black people, persons of color in jail of any state in the country. Mississippi is number 2, just to give you a little context on that. Our prison population per capita is very, very large. The United States is the largest in the world in terms of any close to developed country in terms of our prison population, more than 2 million people. The amount of money that we spend on jails is phenomenal. Our prison population went up a great deal from the 1960s to the present day. We're starting to come down some. It's an area that both state and federal governments are looking at and starting to develop reforms on. But we've got a lot of work yet to be done. Anyway, look at our website. It gives some overviews. It's got a lot of sites, a lot of articles that I think will be worthwhile and useful. Just hitting on some of the initiatives this year, removing the governor from the parole process, parole decisions. Some of you may have seen an op-ed by Paris Glendenning in the Washington Sun 3 or 4 days ago, in which he said, I made a mistake. I said, when I ran for governor the first time, he said, life means life. If you got a life sentence, you stay there. Even if it's a life sentence that is eligible for parole. We are one of 3 states, which is, I think, Oklahoma and California and Maryland, that requires the governor's approval to be paroled if you're on a life sentence, and they rarely do so. We've got a parole board of 10 people that are appointed by the governor that have specialization in identifying when someone who has a life sentence and deserves parole should be paroled. They make recommendations to the governor, and the governor usually vetoes it. But we want to remove the governor from parole. I think that stands a chance. We've been working on that a number of years. I think it stands a fairly good chance of passage this year. The governor may veto it, and we'll see if we can override it if he does. Another bill that MAJR took up for the first time this year is marijuana legalization. You may know that Virginia just passed marijuana legalization. It doesn't come into effect for a couple of years, but that's before our legislature. It's a lot of consideration. A lot of people are in jail for marijuana offenses, and this would save a lot of money. It would save a lot of hardship for a lot of individuals. It would generate a lot of money. If it were legalized in Maryland under this legislation, it would be sold in similar fashions to alcohol, and the funding would go into education, health, mental health, drug abuse and a whole lot of other areas. So we're supporting that. We raised that with our membership at the end of last year, and there was approval for us to take that on as a priority. Felony murder. Generally, and this would, as it's currently proposed by legislation, House and Senate bills, it would affect young people. You can have 4 juveniles involved in stealing a car. Unbeknown to 3 of them, one of them has a gun and shoots and kills somebody. All 4 of them can go to jail for life, and that would change that so that persons are not found guilty of murder who are involved in that kind of fashion. And that's a lot of our prison population as well. A bill that I think is going to probably pass this year, we've worked on for a couple of years, is citations in lieu of instead of arrest on a number of areas in which the police are given the option to issue citations, like a driver's speeding ticket. Instead of arresting somebody, putting them in jail, they may be unable to get out for 3 or 4 days. They lose their jobs. They can get behind just by simply being in jail. They get a record and all of that. The States Attorneys Association, the Maryland Chiefs of Police and Sheriffs are supporting the legislation this year, and I think that stands a good chance. All of these bills, their numbers are cited on our website, and I'll give more information, more detail when we get to that this afternoon. Also, legislation, House bill that would improve Maryland's expungement procedures. There's currently burdensome, difficult procedures to remove public records for people that have prior offenses. It causes problems with getting jobs and other things that would make that much, much easier. There's a couple of bills that, one that we introduced that is to create a prison ombuds program. I think there's about 11 states, Crystal and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong on that. A number of states have ombuds programs for prison population, and they work very well. When I was in Iowa, I did some criminal practice back in the mid 70s. I came to Maryland in 79 and set up a legal aid office. When I was in Maryland, I worked with the Ombuds program that included for prisons and other areas. I've talked with them recently. It's been in existence since I think 1972. It's an outstanding program. It would work very well. It would provide opportunities for mediation on areas of conflict between prison population and the guards or others. And so that's one of our major priorities, and that comes up for testimony, I think, early next week in the House Judiciary and Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. I don't know how much more time I've got. I think I was asked to take maybe close to 20 minutes. I can go on a little bit more, or if that covers the area decently, I really do encourage you to look at our website, to sign up. If you want to get notices from us, including drafts of testimony that you can submit, we'd be delighted to have you on board. And our legislators need to hear from you. It makes a huge difference. Some of these bills, I think, will go forward this year. Some maybe will be carried over, but I'm excited. I think this is going to be a good legislative session. It's for some of us who have been involved in doing some legislative advocacy for a number of years. It's a big difference in process. We're not down there. We are doing it by email. We're doing phone calls. We're submitting our testimony. It's a little different, but legislators need to hear from you, and your support on this kind of legislation makes a huge difference. So if there are any questions before I sort of wrap down this session, and look forward to meeting with a bunch of you, with Crystal and perhaps Pat this afternoon. We'll go into a lot more in terms of some of our other legislative priorities and and talk about specifics and particularly what kinds of testimony you may want to give.
Listen, Bob, thank you very much for that. And I would add my voice to those, to yours, just to urge people to visit the website, and really extensive agenda for MAJR this year, and really covering all parts of the spectrum, not just reducing incarceration, more humane treatment inside, and really finding better ways to equip the returned citizens for rejoining their getting back to their lives, basically.